We go back to Parkland. Phil Keating now has as a guest Florida Attorney General Pam Bondi, who we just heard from in that press conference. Phil, I don't think the Attorney General can hear me. If she could go into this whole aspect of a social media imprint, what some of these shooters are saying online, are we capturing enough of this? Are we paying enough attention to that?
All right, Sean, the first thing I want to ask you before we get to what you said with President Trump today is social media and what some of these killers and accused killers in these mass murders and shooting sprees are posting or hinting at or alluding to. What can we do about that from a law enforcement perspective?
Well, first of all, when they're posting it on social media, they have followers. So kids who are out there, parents, you've got to monitor this stuff. And if you see it, take everything seriously. Take every threat seriously and report it to law enforcement. We would rather you do that and be wrong 99% of the time than have anything happen in this world. And these teens now are vocal on social media. They don't just pop up from anywhere. There are warning signs. And if you see warning signs with your child, if you know some of your kids' friends who you feel, you need to report it. You need to go to school counselors. You need to let people know that something isn't right.
Last summer, you spent so much time up in Orlando for the Pulse nightclub shooting. How sickened were you today when suddenly you got the call, it's happened to you again at another school here in your state?
It was heartbreaking. And in fact, when I was I came down here, but on my way down, I also went to Las Vegas when they had the mass shooting at the concert out there. And one of the victims that I still keep in touch with, she has a bullet lodged in her spine. She contacted me on my way down and was still so traumatized, crying, saying that she's still praying for the victims here. So this is really the third time, and we've partnered with the great men and women of the FBI who are victims advocates with mine, and we're working just to get these families through this, to get them the counseling, the help they need, and to not be taken advantage of, believe it or not, by bad people during this time of tragedy.
Phil?
And Sean, you have one more thing you want to
ask
ask
one more question for the Attorney General. Attorney General Bondi has been known for a really tough law and order Attorney General in the state of Florida. My question is, if we can't monitor evil that's in people's hearts, is it time? What about retired military, retired police in every school? At least have some front line of defense to give some capacity to stop carnage when it starts like this.
As an aggressive law enforcer and the chief law enforcement officer in the state of Florida, the fourth most populous state in the country. Third, actually, past New York. So is it feasible and is it plausible, and should we do it, start having armed guards at every single school? And if not armed guards, you have perhaps retired military, retired law enforcement to provide a beefier scenario in and around schools as a form of deterrent.
Yeah, well, as a career prosecutor, I firmly agree with that. Yes, that's why we have school resource officers. Do they need more help? Yes. Do I see, of course, if we have the funding for it, I think we do. I think we need that now. That's what we're seeing around this world, and we have to protect our kids from these monsters. You know, President Trump called me tonight, and we talked at length. He is heartbroken. He is praying for all these families. All he wanted to ask me, how are the families, how are the families, how are the families? And that's where I'm headed now, to do my job as Attorney General, and with my advocates provide counseling, funeral expenses, and mental health counseling for all these traumatized victims as well.
You know, President Trump is scheduled to be in Orlando on Friday afternoon, then make his way to Mar-a-Lago for the weekend. In light of this, did he indicate whether he would also be making a visit down here?
You know, all we talked about, his only concern tonight, the victims, as it should be. All he asked about were, how are the victims? How are the victims? Are they okay? How are the families? He was so worried about the families and the victims. You know, he's a father, he's a grandfather, and he deeply, deeply cares about what's happening down here.
And granted, we are very early into the prosecution of this case,
Yes.
but clearly he's 19 years old.
19.
He is eligible for the death penalty, eligible for full convictions on murder, multiple counts, and life in prison. Any personal feelings as to what you would like to see your state attorney pursue?
Well, you're talking to a career prosecutor who seeks death penalty, who's prosecuted death penalty cases. Again, we don't know the aggravators and the mitigators. We don't know the mental health now. But when you kill that amount of people, surely this would be a death penalty case.
Especially when it seems so pre-planned and pre-designed with pulling of the fire alarm.
And I can't talk about the facts now, but given what I know, I would firmly believe it would be a death penalty case, of course.
Attorney General Pam Bondi, thank you very much for joining us here. And Sean, one last thing that the governor did say, I want to recap. He said, you know, as a grandparent, a parent, you see this on the news, you wonder, oh my gosh, could this happen to me? And when you see it happen again, your heart sinks. And his conclusion was, the only thing you can conclude here tonight, this man, this suspect, is nothing but pure evil.
Sean. All right. Phil, thank you. And the Attorney General, thank you.